which were, in one case at least, 50 conditions were imposed upon the approval. And again, this was a bipartisan Public Utilities Commission that approved the pipeline, the standards of the steel, the depth of the burying. TransCanada is paying full market value for the land under which it passes. It's not buying the land, it's buying an easement. Farmers and ranchers can continue to use the land once it's, the construction period is over. They're also paying for any crop damage. They're paying 100% the first year, I believe 50% the second year, 25% assuming that the crop is completely destroyed the first year and that 50% of the crop is destroyed the second year and 25% the third year, when in fact that's not occurring in practice. So I believe our landowners are getting fair compensation. And again, the Public Utilities Commission took months of testimony, hundreds and hundreds of pages of input from TransCanada and citizens up and down the corridor on the pipeline. I believe that's the way our system should work. We have PUC commissioners whose job it is to look that over and study it, and they did so. So I believe the environment is being adequately protected. Now certainly if there was some question, I know that was just raised recently about the pipe and the EPA, or rather the PUC is, if the EPA is going to look at that again, but the standards of the steel, I believe the PUC looked at that carefully. And leaks, this is a very viscous product. It's not a thin viscosity product. So if there is a leak, it is relatively small in the area that it affects. And so I believe, I trust our PUC commissioners, both Democrat and Republican, and I believe they're protecting our interests.
Mr. Heidepen, you have 2 minutes to rebuttal.
Thank you, Paul. You can't hide behind the PUC, Lieutenant Governor. You just can't do it. The South Dakota legislature had a bill not once, but twice, to protect the environment in South Dakota. A 2-cent a barrel assessment. 2 cents a barrel. You wouldn't think that would impose much of a problem for a multinational oil company like TransCanada. But 2 cents a barrel was too much for the administration to impose on TransCanada. Now remember, this is not a company that's creating alternative energy with the state of South Dakota. This has nothing to do with ethanol or wind. Those were the commodities we sought to create incentives for with the energy incentive law. TransCanada qualified, fair enough, they got paid under Keystone 1. Why on earth would we repeat that mistake with Keystone 2? But this administration insists that we give them another $10.5 million while we zero fund education, among other things. That's a tragedy.
Okay, well, to return to the dwelling upon of the 2 cents a barrel, I'll just make this remark that the South Dakota legislature did act upon concerns about spills. They changed the law to require that TransCanada must clean up any spill immediately, whether or not it's their fault. The first thing that must occur is they must clean it up. Doesn't matter if it's a contractor that has damaged the pipe or someone else has done something. They must clean it up themselves, and then we worry about whose liability it is. So we did change the law to protect our environment in that way, and I believe that is sufficient.
We're going to get to another energy topic here before we move on to some more questions, and we'll start with you, Mr. Dugard. The U.S. House passed a cap-and-trade agreement, but the U.S. Senate wouldn't consider it. Polls show a lot of people are concerned about global warming. How concerned are you about global warming? What are the related policies that should be pursued in South Dakota?
Well, first of all, I am skeptical about the science that suggests global warming is man-caused or can be constrained by man-made efforts. I think it's a very complex world in which we live, and to suggest that our computer modeling can determine how we can, as individuals, change a trend that's occurring certainly by natural causes in many ways, concerns me. I also am concerned that the cap and trade legislation that passed the federal government unfairly places the burdens and expense of dealing with cap and trade upon the Midwest and benefits primarily the coasts. I know when I was campaigning around South Dakota in November and December of this year, many business people that I talked to who were struggling with this recession, one of the constraints in their decisions about adding back workers or expanding a business that was doing well in spite of the recession was the rapidity of change that we're seeing at the federal government, at the federal level, whether it's health care or the question about tax cuts that are going to expire or not, or will my electric bill go up and will I get a credit? In those kinds of rapidly changing environments, small business people stop and wait for the landscape to settle down. Stop and wait for things to clarify. And that is a problem as we try to grow out of this recession. So cap and trade, in my opinion, is a wrong-headed effort to adopt policies that ignore the realities of our energy needs in the Midwest and to impose the costs of that upon primarily plants like we use here in South Dakota that are fossil fuel based.
Mr. Heiderprim, same question. How concerned are you about global warming? What are the related policies that should be pursued in South Dakota?
Thank you. You know, we can stick our heads in the sand and pretend like the world isn't out there, but it is. And the fact is, global warming, I think, is a reality. I'm not a scientist, but I have to tell you that I think the evidence is significant, and we ignore that evidence at our own peril, ladies and gentlemen. Well beyond that, the question is purely one of self-interest in South Dakota. Where do we come down on this issue? We ought to come down on the side of stopping our addiction to fossil fuels and foreign oil. And the way we do that is by incentivizing green energy process throughout, whether it is ethanol, whether it is wind. And certainly neither Dennis nor I are going to have a vote on cap and trade in Washington, D.C., but we are going to have to work with whatever the Congress passes. And what we want to be able to do is to say that in South Dakota, we have the best chance to be a part of the green revolution when it comes to renewable fuels and renewable energy. Now, we cannot continue to ignore the threat that is imposed on our addiction to fossil fuels and foreign oil. We have to get off it.
Mr. Dugard, 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Well, again, I'm skeptical that our scientists can determine with exactitude what is occurring in our environment and what we can do as humankind to change the motion of our planet. I do agree that we have a bad and risky reliance upon foreign oil. And ethanol, I think, is a solution to that, an important homegrown solution that benefits our farmers and benefits our economy. No question that we would not be in the Middle East today with our National Guard troops fighting in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, on the border of Pakistan and Iraq, if it were not for the fact that those are oil-producing regions. There are plenty of other conflicts and regions of the world where terrorism runs rampant, and we do not have troops there. It's because of oil. And we need to get off that. But it's not because of global warming that we need to get off that. We need to get off that because it's a national security problem. And it's a threat to our nation. And so, again, I'll go back to E15. We need to work hard to get the EPA to get off the dime on E15. They promised they would make a decision last December, and they delayed it until June, and now they've delayed it again. And we need the EPA to get off the dime and approve E15 so that we can take the cap off ethanol production in South Dakota and make more inroads on foreign oil. Except for the nation of Canada, ethanol provides more fuel to America than Saudi Arabia, than Iran, than Nigeria, than Venezuela, any of those other countries. Canada's number one, ethanol's number two, and we